And good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us here tonight on King JordanRadio. And Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays to everybody listening. Today is December 22nd, 2016, Season 5, Episode 14. Tonight on the show, the topics that we will go over: a retired New York cop is charged with killing 4 people in a cocaine deal. We have news on Jon Benet Ramsey that the juror has some news that he said to ABC, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the 101-year-old UK man that has been jailed for allegedly being a pedophile. So we'll get into that story and a couple more stories. Okay, tonight on the program we were set to have Alex Sanchez. Now, he texted me earlier this morning and keep his daughter in your prayers tonight because unfortunately she was hospitalized. Some bad luck for Mr. Alex Sanchez. And Alex, I'm wishing you the best, bud. So he will not be able to join us. So I did some maneuvering, and I got in touch with Levi Page. Levi Page is a blogger himself. He's been on Nancy Grace. He's been on all kinds of stuff. He has a very good following, and for the 5 years that I've been doing this on this show, he's going to make his debut. So let's bring him into the program, and a big welcome to Levi Page. Good evening, Levi. How are you?
Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it. I'm great.
Okay. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you.
Yes.
So we got some interesting stories that we're going to go over. Let's start with Dalia Dippolo Jon. Here's some sound, and I'll talk with you on the other side.
We're hearing now from the Florida woman accused of hiring a hitman to kill her own husband after a judge declared a mistrial in the case against her. Here's NBC's Kerry Sanders.
Dalia Dippolo Jon walks out of court with new hope.
At this time, I'm now declaring this case mistried.
In the second day of deliberations, the jury deadlocked, forcing the judge to declare a mistrial. Dippolo Jon, caught on hidden camera, allegedly making a deal with an undercover police officer to kill her husband in 2009. Also played at trial, video of Dippolo Jon becoming hysterical after police faked her husband's death.
For the past 7 years, this has been a complete nightmare.
Dippolo Jon spoke with Dateline NBC earlier this week.
No one is seeing what took place before that, and so it's always going to be, a he said, she said, and it shouldn't be that way.
Dippolo Jon says she never intended to go through with it. Her lawyers argued police misconduct, saying the police broke the rules to get sensational video for the TV show Cops.
They just started manufacturing all of these things and creating these scenarios and putting me in these situations that look horrible.
This was the second trial for Dippolo Jon.
We find the defendant guilty of...
In 2011, she was found guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years, but that conviction was overturned on appeal. This time around, jurors were split, with 3 votes for guilty, 3 for not guilty. Prosecutors say they'll try this case for a third time. Boynton Beach police stand behind their investigation. As for Dalia's alleged target, her now ex-husband, Mike Dippolo Jon,
I wish them all luck. Her family. I don't have any ill feelings towards these people. I'm trying to move past this.
Real-life drama with another unexpected twist. For today, Kerry Sanders, NBC News, West Palm Beach.
And a quick note, Dateline will have much more on the mistrial.
Okay, let me go to Levi. What is your take of this? I was baffled when it was 3-3, and the judge declared it a mistrial, so I believe they're going to go for round number 3. But in your opinion, how did it get to a 3-3? I mean, do you think that these defense attorneys, Brian Claypool and company, put enough reasonable doubt to? Well, obviously they did, but in covering it and watching it, what do you think that they did that was effective to at least have 3 jurors say no?
Well, I think that the defendant being a female and the defendant being attractive had a lot to do with this. I think that if this was reversed and that this was a male defendant accused of putting out a hit on his wife and he was caught on video by an undercover police officer, I think we probably would have had a different result. But the defense did a very good job of putting the police department on trial. If you're not familiar with this case, in 2009 is when this all went down.
Yeah.
Yes, and in 2011, she was convicted, and then in 2011, that conviction was overturned because the defense claimed that they did not get to individually question each jury member during jury selection. And because this was a high-profile case that had gotten national attention, that they should have been able to do that. So the judge reversed the conviction. It was overturned on appeal, and they retried this case. And now it was deadlocked with 3 saying guilty, 3 saying not guilty, and there was even an alternate juror who said they would have voted not guilty as well. And basically her defense was that the cops were the bad guys in this scenario, not her. They said that the cops set this all up for the TV show Cops to be sensational. Right. And this is very outrageous and outlandish and hard to believe. But apparently some jurors fell for this. And another thing that they did that was quite successful was that they put her lover that she was having an affair with, Muhammad, they put him on the stand, the prosecution did, and the defense really went after him, saying that he did not call the police to report a murder for hire, but he called the police to report Dalia Dippolo Jon as a victim of domestic violence, and that the police turned this all around and set her up for this murder for hire plot. So the defense, very successful in the way that they've tried this case, and there's going to be a retrial, and Brian Claypool was quoted in the South Florida media as saying, "Bring it on." So we're going to see if prosecutors, after the third bite at this apple, can get a conviction. I mean, this is they must really believe in their case if they're going to try her a third time.
Oh, most definitely. And, you know, in that video that became very sensational on YouTube, which she said she's 5,000% sure, you know, if this was the case, like, shouldn't there been a head of the cops or something when she's doing this? I mean, there is no, you know, if you read her body language, there is nothing to indicate that this is a show or anything. Did you see anything in that video that would say to you, this is being done for a TV show?
Well, I think that she was putting on a show. Just from me watching it, she was putting on a show with her over-dramatic crying when she was informed that her husband was dead. It looked like she was trying to play the victim, not necessarily that the cops were putting on a show and just doing this to get, you know, make good TV for the show Cops, but that she was doing this to try to portray herself as a victim. That's what I got. I mean, we heard her crying there. It was extremely overdramatic, and when you look at it, knowing everything that we know now, it seems very fake.
Yeah, and you know, I was watching the original Dateline back from 11, and the mother is quoted as saying, "All people make mistakes." You know, so she's basically saying she did it. If you follow that, you know, she said in open court, all people make mistakes, you know. So that's mind-boggling that they did that. And the other thing I want to ask you, though, is what do you think of Brian Claypool sneaking in, let her go home to, she has a baby, I understand, I guess. So he snuck that in there in closing arguments. I mean, the jurors, had some compassion for the child. Could that be part of a good strategy?
She's living with her mom, and she's on house arrest while she was awaiting this trial, and she ended up pregnant. And that's just a weird scenario altogether. I don't know why anybody would want to, have a relationship with someone who can't leave their house and is on trial for putting out a hit on their husband, but someone did, and I don't know if that makes her sympathetic or not. Apparently it did to these jurors. I think that what we see in a lot of these cases is that women are treated differently by the criminal justice system.
No question.
Casey Anthony is an example of that when she was acquitted in 2011. Jodi Arias was spared the death penalty. I find it very hard to believe with Jodi Arias. Reverse it. Let's say Jodi Arias was a male. Let's say a black male.
Right.
I think that he probably would have ended up on death row, and I think that this is an example of a female who is attractive. At the time of this, she was very young. She was in her 20s. Now she's 34, still relatively young, and people are sympathetic.
Casey, you're talking
about? No, Dalia Dippolo Jon. She's 34 now,
okay.
But at the time of this, she was in her 20s. So
right.
This is somebody that people don't want to think that this is a menacing, conniving, evil person that's putting out a hit on their husband. They want to feel sympathy. They don't want to believe the allegations. And I think that her sex has a lot to do with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at Jodi Arias. She committed, if anybody deserved the death penalty, it would be Miss Jodi Ann Arias. I mean, she gets up there at the sentencing and she says, first she says during the trial, as you know, basically she was in a fog. And then at the end, the infamous, the gun went off or something like that. And, words to the effect, it came back to her. Her memory came back. So that was going on in that case.
Yeah, and remember, she first told the police that people broke into the home and killed him. So she told all sorts of stories.
First couple stories.
Yeah, and then she claimed that she was a victim of domestic violence. I mean, people believe outlandish stories if it's coming from a female that's attractive. Remember Casey Anthony. Casey Anthony claimed Zenaida Gonzalez kidnapped Kaylee. Then she claims that her father, George Anthony, covered up the death after the baby drowned in the swimming pool, and people still believed her even after all the stories that she told. And in the Dalia Dippolo Jon case, some of these jurors did not trust the police. They thought that the police set this up to be sensational on the TV show Cops, and they said there was reasonable doubt in this case. And she came up with this outlandish story that's extremely hard to believe, that she did this all for a television show. And at one point she said that her husband was in on this. She said that her husband was in on setting this up on for the TV show Cops.
Right. That is crazy.
When is that? I mean, and that's just so outlandish to believe that we have a police department who, South Florida is a pretty big region. A lot of people live in that region of the country, very high crime area, that they don't have anything better to do than pick up these two people out of God knows where and set up this scenario for a TV show. I mean, come on, that is outrageous thinking.
But you definitely have a great point with the notoriety and the female sex factor. Definitely, played big roles, probably in this case, definitely in the Casey Anthony case. and definitely in Jodi. You know, a lot of people, when that verdict came out with Anthony, they said this is O.J. So I wouldn't go that far. I mean, it was pretty, she was pretty guilty to me, but I don't know if she's O.J. guilty. I mean, that's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. What about that?
I think, Casey Anthony and the O.J. Simpson case are trials that, will go down in history. I mean, O.J. Simpson was a trial that was televised, and that really started the coverage that we see on TV today of high-profile trials. And the Casey Anthony trial was the first trial where people followed it on social media, Twitter and Facebook, as well as television. So those are two trials that I will never forget. Never
I mean,
forget.
The Kardashians were tweeting about it. That's how big it was, that trial. And Jodi, like, what was she on the stand there? 10 days or something, like that?
She was on the stand for a very long time. Very long time. That was an extremely long trial. And I think that the jury, they saw Jodi Arias on the stand, and I think some of them sort of bonded with her, if that is even possible given the allegations against her, but they bonded with her because they were seeing her so much on that stand.
Yeah, that's what they said could happen. I think there was only one person, though, that didn't want to go for death, right, in that second retrial of the death penalty stage.
Yeah, I think it was a male juror as well that said that. I'm not sure, but I think it was male that did not want to vote for death.
Yeah, it was a sensational trial. Also, the hot part of that trial, as you bring up your point, makes even more sense because it was pretty open book, with what's his name, Harris. He was convicted.
Justin Ross Harris, yes.
Right. That didn't take too long. So, that's it's a very good point,
And what do you think would happen in that case if it was a attractive female that claimed that she just forgot that she left her child in the car? I don't know. I think it could have been a possibility.
The case, well, he said the evidence of the sexting, let's say the female was sexting, was very overwhelming. I don't know, but there was chloroform and the other one. It's very hard to say. So, but it's reasonable. There's some reasonable doubt more, I think, though, in any of those cases than OJ, because you can at least make something, even if it's like weird reasonable doubt, you cannot make, I don't know, they said the son maybe, but I cannot find anybody else that would have any reason to kill two people that Mr. Simpson killed, allegedly.
I agree. I think that the jury in the O.J. Simpson case was angry at the Los Angeles Police Department, and they perceived the police department to be racist and targeting African Americans. And I think some of them on the jury probably believed that O.J. was guilty, but that this was sort of a stick it to the police department because it's a very controversial police department. They've, been investigated by the FBI for civil rights violations, and the defense really took advantage of the distrust in that community of the police department with African Americans on the jury. I think that they voted not guilty based solely on race. I think they ignored the facts, and I think that that's extremely tragic because Nicole Brown Simpson had reported O.J. Simpson to the police for domestic violence in the past. There was even a 911 call that she made where she was hysterically screaming for the police to come to her her home because O.J. Simpson was there knocking down the door. We could hear her crying. We could hear O.J. Simpson yelling through the other end of the phone. I don't think that there was no doubt that he was abusive. There were the photographs of her beaten to a pulp. So he was the only one that had motive to murder her. There was no one else out there. There was a lot of weird theories in that case saying that drug dealers did it. But O.J. Simpson was really the only one that had the motive to do it. There was a boatload of evidence against him. DNA found at the scene of the crime, DNA in his Bronco, the police chase in the Bronco where he, endangered people's lives all throughout the interstate in Southern California. A boatload of evidence against him. I don't think, no matter what, that jury was going to let him walk solely because they did not like the police department. And Mark Fuhrman, they despised Mark Fuhrman.
They despised Mark Fuhrman, and it's interesting. They have the show coming up now. Is O.J. Innocent? Is coming up on the ID network. Everybody's trying to capitalize off that very successful FX show, which was done about 6-7 months ago on FX, and that was an enjoyable 11-week show, I believe. So you saw 30 for 30. They did something after that. There was other places, and now coming up on January 13th, there's a 3-part documentary that basically the name of the show is O.J. Innocent. So, I know Marsha Clark is animated against that, but we'll see what happens in terms of that. Okay, let's move on to another story. The Jon Benet Ramsey story. We have a grand juror who did speak to ABC. Let's hear some of what he had to say, and we'll talk on the other side.
That ABC News exclusive, 20 years after Jon Benet Ramsey's murder, a grand juror in the case is speaking out for the first time about secret evidence and testimony. And, Amy, this juror revealed to you what was going on behind those closed doors.
He did indeed, George, and the mystery surrounding the 6-year-old beauty queen's death still remains, of course, unsolved. But back in 1998, Boulder law enforcement thought they had a case, and they presented it in secrecy to a grand jury. Well, now one of the only people to hear all that evidence is talking for the first time.
After all that conjecture about kidnappers and intruders, the only people in the hot seat are Jon Benet's parents, Jon and Patsy Ramsey.
We're pleased to be here this morning.
At the Justice Center, prosecutor Alex Hunter presents the case to the panel of 8 women and 4 men.
No one is talking about what's going on in the courtroom, and we don't expect a lot of information to come out in the next few weeks.
Grand jury proceedings in Colorado and elsewhere are secret. The penalties for revealing testimony or evidence can be severe, even jail time. In spite of that threat, nearly 2 decades later, one member of that jury has agreed to talk to 2020.
Because of the noise, let's take 20 seconds quiet.
Given the possible repercussions, we agreed to alter his voice and show his face in shadow.
Before you were a grand juror, what did you know about the Jon Benet Ramsey case?
Very little. I saw that there was a little girl dressed up with, in my opinion, a sexual persona, and it disgusted me, and I turned off the TV.
Over the course of more than a year, he and the other grand jurors grappled with evidence and testimony from dozens of witnesses. The whole jury even took a field trip to the Ramsey home on 15th Street, walking down those basement stairs to see the cellar crime scene for themselves.
In the basement where she was found, it was a very eerie feeling, like someone had been killed here.
They were told to indict only if they found probable cause. In other words, if they found that it was more likely than not that the Ramseys killed their own daughter.
Was there enough evidence to indict Jon and Patsy Ramsey of a crime?
Based upon the evidence that was presented, I believe that's correct.
But if the case went to trial, did he believe that the Ramseys would be convicted?
No.
Based on the evidence you were presented, do you feel you know who killed Jon Benet Ramsey?
I highly suspect I do.
Now, the grand jury handed up an indictment accusing Jon and Patsy Ramsey not of murder but of child abuse, finding they allowed Jon Benet to be placed in a situation which resulted in her death. And, of course, the prosecutor decided not to pursue that indictment. George?
Let's talk to Dan Abrams about that right now. And usually you think of prosecutors sort of molding the grand jury in the image they want them to be. But this time we're hearing from this juror saying, no, we wanted to do it, he didn't.
Right. Well, remember, it is only the prosecution presenting evidence to a grand jury, right? There is no defense attorney there. So typically what happens is the prosecutor will present the evidence in the hope of getting an indictment. In almost all cases, they get it. In this case, they claimed that they tried to present the entirety of the case to the grand jury to let them decide. The problem was that the grand jury did not, as Amy points out, come back with an indictment for murder, but instead this kind of compromise child abuse indictment. I think that this prosecution, this team, was very divided within the Boulder DA's office about whether to move forward, and in the end, Alex Hunter did not feel he'd get a conviction.
Yeah, we hear this grand juror say he thinks he knew who did it.
Yeah, well, he clearly believes that it was, Patsy or Jon Ramsey. I mean, that's who the evidence was presented against in the grand jury. So, but again, let's remember, A, this was a long time ago before there's been some new information about DNA evidence, et cetera, and B, that there was no defense there. The lead prosecutor who was presenting this case to the grand jury was one of the prosecutors who believed that the Ramseys, or at least Patsy Ramsey, should be indicted. So important to keep that in mind. This was not a juror in the typical way that we think of jurors who heard all the evidence, heard both sides, and came to a conclusion. This is a grand juror who heard only the prosecution side and decides now that this person thinks that he knows who did it.
It's just incredible. We're getting new information 20 years out.
Unbelievable.
Dan,
unbelievable.
Thank you very much. And all of you at home can see the full interview tonight on 2020 at 10 Eastern right here on ABC.
Let me give the motive that is ascribed to you. Okay. You were downstairs, maybe she came down, she said, Mommy, I wet my bed. You said, again, Jon Benet, and you either pushed her or you hit her, you were exhausted, you were furious. You did it.
You have a child. Would you get up in the middle of the night and slaughter your child? We're parents. We love our children.
These are the two major motives. Either you sexually molested her or you snapped because primarily she was bedwetting.
Let me tell you something. I'm a cancer survivor of stage 4 cancer. Jon has lost a child in an automobile accident. That completely changes your outlook. When you are standing on the brink of death with a terminal illness, your priorities suddenly line up in a row, and you know exactly what the important things are in life. And bedwetting is totally insignificant.
Did either of you for a moment suspect each other?
No.
Not for
absolutely
a
not
minute.
for a microsecond.
Does it sound possible that a killer would sit for hours and hours in your house?
That house was so rambling. There were so many hiding places.
Really?
He could be hidden for a week, and we wouldn't find him.
Hello?
Oh, I'm sorry. I had a mute there, Levi. Sorry about that. So, what's your take on the what's going on now with the this juror for the secret grand jury? And you heard the clip, of course, of what's her name, Barbara Walters with the parent. What is your take, first of all, on this case?
I think that this is a mess. I think that the police department thought that it was an inside job, someone from the Ramsey family. The district attorney's office thought that it was an intruder. We also had a district attorney bringing in a private investigator that also thought that it was an intruder. So I think when the DA and the police are not on the same page, that makes it extremely unlikely that there will ever be a successful prosecution. Furthermore, we have the grand jury that voted to indict Jon and Patsy Ramsey, not for murder, but for accessory to murder and for child abuse leading to murder. They thought that Jon and Patsy Ramsey placed her in a situation where she was abused, placed her in a situation in which she was died as a result of child abuse, And they also think that the parents covered up what happened to her, that they were an accessory. We also had a documentary that came out in this case that was aired on CBS, the case of Jon Benet Ramsey. And in that documentary, there were some very high-profile investigators, very high-profile forensic pathologists, and one of them was Dr. Warner Spitz, who gave his theory on what happened. And his theory is that the parents were covering up for their son, Burke Ramsey, who was just a little kid at the time of his sister Jon Benet Ramsey's murder. He claims that Burke Ramsey hit Jon Benet Ramsey over the head with something during an argument, and that the parents staged this by writing the ransom note. And there is some evidence that suggests that could be true. For instance, the ransom note was written inside the home with paper inside the home, a pen that was found inside the home. Not only was a ransom note written, but a practice ransom note was written by someone inside the home, which suggests it was someone that was comfortable in the home. It would suggest that it was someone that was not worried about being detected by the home owners. And that's very compelling. My problem with that theory is he was a little kid, and he was interrogated by the local police, the FBI, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. If he did this, don't you think he would have cracked under all that intense questioning by law enforcement? That's my problem with this theory.
An older person would.
Yeah, I don't think that we'll ever find out exactly who killed her. I think he was around 9 years old at the time of her death.
And what was your take on the when he went on Dr. Phil? A few months back.
I found his behavior bizarre, but I also give him a break because he was under such intense scrutiny for all of these years. There's no way that he could live a normal life. I mean, think about it. There were tabloids in every grocery store that called him a murderer. Think about it. You're a little kid. You're in the checkout line at the grocery store. You look over and you see a tabloid that's accusing you of murdering your sister. There's all sorts of theories about him. So if he is innocent, I can understand why this may have affected him, and I can understand why he would, be nervous going on television, nationally syndicated popular show like Dr. Phil, and answering all of these questions about whether he murdered his sister when he was a little kid. He probably doesn't even remember a lot about that time. So I give him a break. But, at the same time, I can't rule it out. I can't say that he's 100% innocent because there have been very compelling arguments made by a lot of people. Now, I should point out that Warner Spitz, who participated in that CBS series, is being sued by Burke Ramsey for $150 million, a defamation suit. And he's just filed a motion.
When did this one air, this CBS production?
A couple of months ago.
Oh, okay. So he's being sued.
Yes, he's being sued. He was one of the participants, and CBS is also being sued as well. But Spitz has been singled out because he's the one that vocally voiced his theory on this. And something else that I wanted to point out was, the parents are extremely suspicious, and what's very weird to me is that Jon Benet Ramsey was fed pineapple right before she died. The autopsy report suggested that she had undigested pineapple in her body, which means she just ate it, and before she could digest it, she was killed. Now, the bowl of pineapple had Patsy Ramsey's fingerprints on it, and she denied feeding Jon Benet Ramsey pineapple. She denied it. Now, why would you deny feeding your child pineapple? That's extremely odd. I don't know I don't know why she would deny it, and the murder happening right after she ate it is extremely troubling to me. I don't know who killed Jon Benet Ramsey, but a lot of the evidence points to, I don't think Burke Ramsey, but maybe the parents.
What would be the motivation, Levi?
I think that's the problem. You can't wrap your mind around these two. They look like they're very well-dressed, very well-spoken.
Mm-hmm.
Patsy Ramsey was always described as being very friendly, a Southern belle, very warm and welcoming to people in this community. So people can't really wrap their mind around someone murdering their 6-year-old daughter. A lot of people have suggested, and I don't know about these theories because I don't know all the facts of this case like law enforcement, like the grand jurors do that viewed secret evidence in this case, but a lot of people have said that she got angry because of bedwetting, that maybe she was angry that Jon Benet Ramsey got out of bed and ate that pineapple. There's a lot of theories in this case. The problem is that you can't point your finger at just one person, and I think that's a problem. If you're going to try someone, you need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they did this. And just think, if Patsy Ramsey, John Ramsey, or Burke Ramsey could have ever testified, they could have done a cross-finger point.
Yeah.
It wasn't me, it was Patsy, or Patsy could say it wasn't me, it was John, or it was my son. And I think that's the problem in this case. Cross-finger pointing, there would have been a built-in reasonable doubt for every single defendant. And
right.
We have a lot of people that do believe that an intruder got into that home. We had an investigator for the district attorney's office, Lou Smith, who later passed away, who was adamant that the Ramseys were innocent of this crime. He thinks that there was a window to the basement that was unlocked. John
right.
Ramsey said that he had even gotten into his house when he would lock himself out of his house. He would use the window to this basement, and a lot of people say that points to an intruder. But there's even problems with that theory. It was snowy outside, which means the ground was wet. Wouldn't there be footprints of someone in the mud, because it creates slushy and a muddy texture to the dirt and the ground after it snows? Would there not have been footprints? And also there were cobwebs all around that window to the basement. And the CBS documentary pointed this out, and that was a very compelling point, that if an intruder did slide into the house through that basement window, they would have gotten cobwebs all over him themselves. However, the cobwebs on that window were intact. They were not disturbed. So that would point to someone not sneaking in through the window. And we also have the DNA that was found on Jon Benet Ramsey in her underwear. Many people say that is evidence of an intruder. However, some people say that DNA could have come from the underwear manufacturer, someone that's in the manufacturing room when this underwear is being made, and that you can't necessarily rule anyone out just because there is foreign DNA in our underwear. So this is a mess from the beginning, a big mess, because the prosecution and the police were not on the same page. People within the police department had very different opinions on this. Some thought that it was Burke, some thought that it was Patsy, and some thought that it was John Ramsey. And John Ramsey was being interrogated one time, and they pointed to the fact that a police officer pointed to the fact that fibers of his sweater was found in Jon Benet Ramsey's underwear, and he got extremely angry and started cussing at them. So if you
really
can't, so if you can't point your finger at one person and say this is the person that did it, and there's all of these other people that have acted suspicious, all of these other theories that could also make sense, how can you ever get a conviction? How can you ever put it in front of a grand jury?
Yeah, this is just too much.
And not to mention the bungling of the investigation. This investigation was bungled by the police department. They did not immediately search the entire home. They got to the home and did not find the body. They got to the home that morning, did not find the body until the afternoon. you would have think that they would have immediately searched that house up and down as soon as they got to that home. But they did not, and they even let Jon Ramsey pick his daughter up and hug her when they found the body. The crime scene was bungled, and anybody that was prosecuted, all the defense had to do was say, look at how the police bungled this case. You're going to believe what they have to say. So this case was never going to be prosecuted, ever.
Let's say this happened, hypothetically, in 2016. Do you think there would be a much better chance of getting the killer or killers?
I think possibly if they had sealed off this home and done a thorough search of the home when they immediately got there, and when they found the body, they did not let the parent hug her and touch her body. And if they would have immediately separated the parents for questioning, because at first the parents did not cooperate with the investigation. They hired attorneys, they got on a private plane, they flew to Atlanta. So, yes, I think that maybe there could have been conviction if they would have done a proper investigation from the very beginning, as soon as they arrived to the home.
Yeah, wow, this is one of the most mind-boggling cases of in American history, and it's really a shame, I'll tell you. I don't think we'll ever get this solved, but there has been talk of maybe new DNA, possibly. I don't know if you heard about that.
Mm-hmm. They're going to do new DNA tests.
So, yeah, I don't know if that's just mumbo-jumbo talk, if they're actually going to, if that's going to happen, or, what is that going to supposedly help them do with this new DNA testing?
There has been a lot of talk about the DNA test. Some people said that this DNA rules out the family because there was DNA from an unknown male in Jon Benet Ramsey's underwear. Other people have said that this DNA could have come from the manufacturer that made the underwear. And also it was touch DNA, which means it was an extremely small amount of underwear. And let's say, you can get touch DNA just by shaking someone's hand. And you shake someone's hand, you go to the bathroom and you're, zipping up your pants, pulling your pants back up. Maybe the DNA got in there that way. So I don't see how DNA can say that someone did it, especially such small amount, especially it being touch DNA. We can 100% say that person is the killer just based on DNA. Remember, there was a very crazy man by the name of John Mark Carr who was obsessed with this case. And in 2006, he confessed that he killed Jon Benet Ramsey. And they extradited him from the United States, from Thailand, and wasted a bunch of taxpayer dollars. They did DNA tests. He did not match the DNA. They even spoke to some of his ex-wives, one of them who said that he was not even in the state of Colorado at the time of Jon Benet's murder. So there's been a lot of suspects in this case, and he was just a nut. And they based.
I remember.
I don't see anyone ever being prosecuted. Nobody will ever be prosecuted for this case, unless let's just say they do get a match on the DNA, and not only do they need that DNA evidence, they need something else besides that DNA evidence. I would have to say they would need the DNA to match someone and a confession.
Yeah, I mean, the things that bother me is like you said, they're very defensive. Well, the late Ramsey mother was very defensive. If you watched her on Larry King, any interview she did, I don't know. It's interesting. I can't clear cut say she did it. I look at Jody, and my reason why she did it. She wanted a free time. I mean, even she's a nut. Even if she didn't do it because the baby's missing, and she's going to Blockbuster, and she's going to all tattoos and all that stuff. So that's nuts right there. So she's a nut job just by, everything that went on, even if she didn't kill the baby, if you want to believe that, but you have reason. With this case, you don't have that smoking gun fully, in my opinion, which is terrible. So, sad indeed. Okay.
Did you watch the interview that Patsy Ramsey did with Larry King, and they had one of the detectives that was very adamant that the Ramseys were guilty? That was very compelling television. I encourage people to Google that interview, Larry King along with one of the detectives that confronted them on live TV. I mean, wow, it was crazy. I mean, we will never see another case like this, and unfortunately, I don't think it will ever be solved unless we have a confession and DNA evidence to match it. Yeah,
I mean, that's the only way. If somebody confesses, besides that moron that did 10 years ago, somebody that we could link it to, but. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They're very defensive, but I would like to get a body language expert for that purpose of what you mentioned. That would be very interesting. Okay, we have a New York, Westchester, to be exact, cop charged with killing 4 people with cocaine involved. Here's a sound bite from the story, and we'll talk.
A crooked retired cop in Westchester killed 4 men in a bar over a deal for 5 kilos of cocaine. Nicholas Tartaglione, who once worked as Briarcliff Manor police officer, was charged with killing Martin Luna, Urbano Santiago, Miguel Luna, and Hector Gutierrez in Chester, New York in April as part of his involvement in a drug conspiracy, officials said. Tartaglione was allegedly involved in the conspiracy from June 2015 to April of this year. He shot the 4 men to death in the Liquid Lounge in Chester, New York. At least 2 of his victims were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Tartaglione was accused of murder, drug conspiracy, and a host of other charges. He could face the death penalty or life in prison without parole.
Wow, this is a very big case over here where I am in Brooklyn. It's making front page every day. And wow, what's your take on this?
I mean, this guy is. They've got him red-handed. The bodies were found on his property. And for everybody that's listening to this, just to paint you a picture, this is a very muscular ex-cop. He's bald, very muscular, looks very intimidating. Right. And prosecutors say that, and law enforcement say that he did this because a cocaine deal went bad, and he killed these people at a bar. I don't know how you can just kill this many people at a bar and nobody knows about it. You just kill them and then drive them 30 minutes to a rural farm that he owned and then buried their bodies. Neighbors had said that there was a horrific stench in this area, and when they discovered that bodies were buried there, they were not shocked because the smell coming from his farm was just outrageous. And this guy has been in the news before. While he was a police officer, he was accused of beating people while he was a police officer, including a local public access television host, and the city where he worked, they settled a bunch of money in a lawsuit that was brought against him. He was under investigation for civil rights violations, and this is a crazy case, and this guy seems to be a very shady dude. He retired from the police department, was making $65,000 a year in retirement, but yet he's able to afford a $500,000 farmland. I don't know too many people making $65,000 a year that are out purchasing $500,000 properties. So that would suggest that he's involved in the drug trade. he's making some shady deals, and that's evidence against him.
Yeah, but the only issue is he's just charged right now, and as you know, right, with the cops, it's very hard to get convictions, as we saw with Michael Slager. That ended up in a mistrial, where that, to me, should have definitely been, a slam dunk guilty verdict. That's just me. That's just my take. But with this Connie being a cop, how do you think that helps? Do you think that's a immediate help, right? Or 20% at least?
Well, I think the difference between, this case and other cases where cops are accused of committing crimes, a lot of those police officers are in situations where they're saying their life is in danger, so they had to do it. And in this case, he is accused of killing people because of a drug deal that went wrong, and he buried the body on his property. So I don't see how he's going to get out of that. In other cases, the police can say, "Oh, he was coming at me, so I had no choice but to shoot him and kill him." In this, and in none of those cases did they shoot someone, kill someone, and then bury them on a property. So he did that. So there's no self-defense here. There's no explaining away how those bodies got on your property. And I say that there's going to be more coming out about this police officer and his dealings with drug dealers and drug deals.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about Dylan Roof.
The guilty verdict in a crime that shocked the nation. A jury wasting little time to convict Dylan Roof for the massacre inside a historic black church in South Carolina. The self-radicalized white supremacist stood trial in a federal court for gunning down 9 black parishioners at a Bible study class last year. Eyewitness News reporter Safan Kim in the newsroom with more on the verdict. Safan.
Well, David, after less than 2 hours of deliberations, a jury has reached its verdict. Dylan Roof has been convicted in the racially motivated slayings of 9 black church members in South Carolina. The jury was made up of 9 white people and 3 black people. The 22-year-old faced 33 federal charges, including hate crimes and obstruction of the practice of religion. Now, Roof just stared ahead as the verdict was read, no expression on his face, much as he has throughout the trial. He was standing up listening, doing weird things with his mouth, moving lips side to side when he first stood up, wiggling his fingers. The same jury will return on January 3rd to consider if Roof should be sentenced to death or life in prison for the June 2015 attack at the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston. Now, meanwhile, the judge asked Roof if he'd like to continue representing himself. He told the judge yes.
Wow, Levi, this was just a total hate crime, I guess. This guy was a nut. It took them, I think, less than 2 hours to come with the verdict, I think, right?
Yeah, you're correct. And, there was no way that he was going to walk from this. There was no way that there was going to be a hung jury. He admitted to doing this. And this is such a sad and tragic case. These are people that welcomed him into their church, and they did not expect that he was going to take a gun out from his fanny pack that he was carrying around his waist and start gunning them down. And he did this in cold blood, and he's such a racist. I mean, there's photographs of him with the Confederate flag. There's video of him burning the American flag. And everybody was wondering, what's his defense going to be? He didn't put up a defense. Many people thought that he was going to use a mental health defense. He was going to say that he was not guilty by reason of insanity, and he said he would not use that defense, and this is a quote from him: psychology is, quote, a Jewish invention. So not only does he hate African Americans, black people, he hates Jewish people as well. This is someone that's very conspiratorial, paranoid. He thought that black people were committing crimes against white people when the statistics show that crimes occur in one's own community, such as black people commit crimes against black people and white people commit crimes against white people. So his facts are wrong. He's delusional, but he's hate. He's full of hate. He's hateful, and he committed this crime. He targeted them because this was a predominantly African-American church. He targeted these people, and I think he's going to get the death penalty. In South Carolina, in order to serve on a death penalty case, the jurors have to be death qualified, which means they cannot be against the death penalty. They have to be open to rendering a death penalty in a case. And I think that the jury in this case will, because they watched the video of him gunning down the parishioners of this church. They've seen him in court, that he was not sympathetic. He expressed no regret, no remorse for his actions. Nothing. They will hold that against him. And they know how hateful he is. His manifesto, which was racist in nature, was entered into evidence. They know him. They probably despise him, and I don't think that they will have any problem rendering a death penalty verdict. And if anyone deserves it, it is Dylann Roof.
Definitely, totally, 100% agree with you. That'll happen next month, I believe, right? Sentencing?
Yes.
So we'll definitely check that out. Okay, one last story. This is a very unique story. A 101-year-old UK man jailed for past bad acts in terms of child molestation. Take a listen.
A 101-year-old man who last week became the oldest Briton to be convicted of a criminal offence has been jailed for 13 years for a string of historical sex crimes against two young sisters and their brother. Retired truck driver Ralph Clark was found guilty of raping and abusing two sisters aged between 4 and 13 in the 1970s and early 80s.
He earlier admitted indecently assaulting their brother and attempting to rape him when he was a schoolboy. Prosecutors said the severity of his offences meant that he should face action despite his advanced age and frail condition. His victims finally contacted police in August last year, having seen Facebook posts celebrating Clark's 100th birthday.
And that's where we'll leave it for the time being. We'll be back after this break. Stay with us.
101 years, and I guess this is the law. Well, in the UK it's a little different. So what is your take on this story?
I think that this guy's evil. He's pure evil. I mean, we're talking a lot of people that are pure evil on the show tonight, but this guy,
pure evil night.
Yes, this guy is accused of abusing two girls and a boy. Some of them as young as 4 years old, and he admitted in court that he was immune to feelings. That's a quote from this Ralph Clark, 101 years old, and all indications that I've gotten from reading about this case is that this guy is a psychopath, and he even insulted the victims. A quote from him, he said that they could have said no, and he called them serial liars. Now, what does that mean when he says they could have said no? Some of them were as young as 4 years old, and this is a very tall man, very, very physically dominant man, maybe intimidating to these children. Some of them were probably afraid of saying no to him and his advances. One female said that she was abused every single day, and she wanted to take her life. She contemplated suicide because of this.
Wow.
And his response was they could have said no. And the judge, during the sentencing, sentenced him to 13 years, and the judge said, quote, "You present as a fragile old man. However, what was plain to see was that despite your guilty pleas, you have no remorse whatsoever." And he sentenced him to 13 years in prison. He's 101 years old, a centenarian, so he's going to die in prison where he belongs. He should have been there a long time ago. But justice finally for these victims in this case.
Yeah, I mean, he makes it to 101, but it's good in a way. So he suffers now at this advanced stage, and the victims get some reprieve, hopefully at least.
Yeah, during court, he even turned to the jury in the case and said, "It's Christmas time. Hopefully they'll let us out." So he was totally not taking this seriously, that he was accused of raping and sexually molesting young children, some as the ages between 4 and 13 years old, showed no remorse, and I think he got what he deserved, no sympathy whatsoever. I don't care how old he is.
Yeah, no sympathy at all. Okay, we have Mary. She is in Virginia, and she's saying hello on a Thursday night, King JordanRadio. Mary, you're live with Levi Page and myself, King Jordan. Good evening, Mary.
Mary, I
How are
thought you were in Hawaii.
I'm commuting halfway, half and half. Happy holidays to you, Jordan, and happy holidays to you, Levi.
Well, I've known you for a long time online, following all sorts of different cases, so it's great to hear your voice.
Well, I really would love to have this case solved, the Jon Benet Ramsey. I do not think that the parents did it. I do not think that Burke did it. I think it was someone that knew the family, that was already there and hiding when they went to eat, and had plenty of time to hide and prepare an area and a plan to go do what he was going to do to her. And I think that the smoking gun here is they never were able to identify the DNA that was found inside of her little panties. So where would that have come from? Obviously, it's got to be the person that did it.
Well, Mary, Dr. Henry Lee is a forensic pathologist.
Yeah,
very
I know
well
who is.
respected. He said that the DNA in the underwear could have come from the manufacturer in the manufacturing plant where the underwear was made.
All this time? It could have lasted that time?
Yes.
Wow. Well,
it was
that's
a very
new one
small,
on me. I think I heard you say that, yeah.
It was a very small amount of DNA, but I think you make a good point that it could have been someone that maybe had a key. I don't know.
Yes, and I heard a lot of people had keys to that house.
Yes.
Friends, acquaintances, all kinds of people had keys.
If it was someone, if it was not someone in the family, it had to be someone that was very well acquainted with them, that had a key to the home, and also in the ransom note, I forgot the exact amount, but they knew the exact bonus that Jon Ramsey was getting from a business deal. So it was someone, if it was not the family, it was someone that they knew, was well acquainted with them, knew a lot about them, and was comfortable inside that home.
And the other thing I read, this is new stuff that just came out here the other day, that the Bible, they had a Bible, Ramsey had a Bible, Patsy, and it was open on verse 118. I forgot which chapter, which is a chapter and a verse that she would go often when she was upset about something. So that's kind of, it's all these weird coincidences. I wish someday we do find out who did it before it just doesn't pass 50-year mark and everyone has died. Right. And the other thing on the Dalia, wow, just like the Black Dahlia. This is so ridiculous. I mean, why would the police waste their time to try to frame this woman for why? I mean, can't the prosecutor, wouldn't he just ask, for instance, okay, if this is supposed to be for a cop show, where is the script? Who is the producer? Who is putting out the money for this to be done? None of these questions were ever answered. There was no script. So she said, oh, well, I was contacted. Well, okay. Who contacted you? Were you giving a manuscript? I mean, they don't just, they don't just tape someone random, they at least have to give you some scenario of what's going to happen for a reality TV, and then you act accordingly.
And there had to be, in reality TV,
none of that
contract.
was ever questioned.
And you would think there would have been a contract. Where's the contract? If you were doing this all for TV, where is your contract?
Right, and you have to have some kind of a trail of when is this going to happen, what day is this going to happen. You know, I mean, it just can't happen whenever. It's just so ludicrous. And I do agree with you that women, especially white, good-looking women, get away with murder more than
it seems to be,
their counterpart. So anyway, you all have a Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. Enjoy talking to both of you, and
you too.
Have a great evening.
Thanks, Mary.
Okay, bye-bye.
Happy. Bye-bye, Mary. Thanks for the call. Okay, and we will talk to you guys next week. We're going to have the best of. We'll get into that in a second. But I want to thank Levi Page, who made his debut here tonight. And Levi, before you go, why don't you plug your website and whatever else you want to plug?
Well, first of all,
yourself.
thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it. And it was great to talk to Mary.
This was great.
And I want to say hi to Madeline. I know she's listening. But
yes.
If you can, my website is levipagetv.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Levi_Page and Facebook at facebook.com/LeviPageTV. So tune in. And I also have a show. You can find that at my website, LeviPageTV.com. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. We'll definitely do it again. And you're a wonderful guest. So definitely have a happy holiday and happy New Year. We'll definitely do this again. Thanks again, Levi.
Thanks.
Okay, that was Levi Page, and next week we're going to do the best of 16, which we're bringing back Aphrodite Jones, the true crime host from the ID Network. She will be here. And she will talk some Ramsey, but we're going to talk about the 7 biggest stories. So if you want to leave me any ideas, I mean, I have obviously some that you definitely want to hear. I will, try to make a mention of it. Let's go to the King JordanRadio Facebook page. You could definitely do that, and find me on Twitter at King JordanRAD, KingJordanSportsMedia.com. Also, January 5, we have Richard Herman, who comes back to the program. It's either the 19th or so. Thomas Mesereau, world-renowned defense attorney, will be back on the program. So that is we have a nice next 3 guests, if you will. So, I'd like to thank the audience. Obviously, Maddie, all the work she does is awesome. Vicky, Pager, everybody. And again, I want to also send out my prayers to Mr. Sanchez, who is dealing with his daughter in the hospital right now. I don't have any more details than that. But let's pray for Mr. Sanchez and hope everything gets better with him. Okay, so next week we will be back. We will have Aphrodite Jones. It's been a while since you've been on, so it'll be an interesting show. Every Thursday, of course, 9:30 on the East Coast, 6:30 on the West Coast. So definitely listen to that. Listen to us on iTunes and Stitcher, of course. All that information is on the website, KingJordanSportsMedia.com. Let's leave you with a song, another Christmas song from the Carpenters, and then we'll call it a night. Thanks, everybody. We'll have a great weekend. We'll be back next week. Have a Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah to those who celebrate it.
Greeting cards have all been sent. The Christmas